Next weekend is our big Compassion Weekend. We do this every couple of years. And we get a chance next week, like Ryan said, we're going to be as adults in here. And then our kindergartners up through high school students will also be in the service that weekend as a moment to hear from a man who 25, 30 years ago, he was that little boy. In some church, they had his name on a card and said, hey, you want to sponsor this child for $43 a month. You can feed and clothe and educate this child, provide some health care, those kind of things. Give you a chance to sponsor kids. We're going to give you all a chance to do that. We want our kids in here to be in here to see this and experience this together with us and walk around the room and figure out which one or ones of these kids will be ones that will become part of our family. You write letters to them, you hear from them. It's beautiful, it's awesome, amazing. Come back next week and just be prepared for this exciting story of a guy named Daniel from Kenya who's going to tell us his story of what a difference people like you have made in his life. We're in John chapter 11 today. The reason we're in John chapter 11 is because it's after John chapter 9. Some of you are going, aren't we in a series in the book of Romans right now? And we are. We decided, though, that we jumped out of Romans last week for our big 20-year anniversary celebration thing we did. And then this week, we thought, do we jump back into it? And then knowing Compassion's next week. So we're going to just do this story of Lazarus, one of Jesus' good friends. So in your Bibles, in John chapter 11, we're going to just jump right into the story. It says there, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick. That's twice we've heard that now. So the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is not sick, it's very sick. You know what very sick means? Like if he doesn't get better, he's going to die. This is no longer he's just uncomfortable and he's sick and dying. We're at desperate times here, and they're sending news to Jesus about that. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness won't end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. He goes, Lazarus isn't going to die. He's going to be fine. It's going to turn out great. When Jesus said it's going to turn out great, sometimes that pathway is very different from you and me when we think what turns out great means. You'll see that here in the story. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. If you've been a Christian for longer than 10 minutes, or at church, or read the Bible ever, there's going to be times you're going to look at what Jesus does and what Jesus says, you're going to go, wait, what? Wait, what did he say? This is a person he loves. This is not some distant person, hey, can you come help my buddy over here, Jesus? This is somebody Jesus knows very, very well. It says that he loves these people, like his best, great, like family to him. And when he hears that he's sick, he doesn't go to visit him, to comfort him, to see what he can do. I'm going to stay right where I am for 2 days. Sometimes, you ever been there in your life? You had something go on in your life where you had a very situation. Some of you are in I know some of your stories out there. You're in some very situations with your finances, with your marriage, with your kids, with anxiety, whatever that, you have some very stuff going on today. And you didn't post about it. You didn't want to complain about it. You did what Mary and Martha do. You send word to Jesus. You pray about it and ask God about it. But have you ever been there and thought, is he listening? Because they did everything right. And instead of Jesus going, okay, let's go take care of that. Nah. It feels like, I can't be bothered right now. I got more important things than you to deal with right now. It's not what he's saying here, but it feels like that, if we're honest from time to time. Write this down today. On the back of your program, there's a note sheet that you can fill some things in on. Write this down. It says this here today. My time frame, in terms of how God does things, my time frame isn't usually or ever his. You ever prayed that way about something, whether it's a relationship thing going on, a work situation, something in your life that God's going to work and repair on, and as you pray, you brainstorm with God about how it might happen. Be cool, I met him here, and then we'll go out here today here, so make this. And God goes, you're so cute, pal. You really think you're going to just tell me how you bring some of the time frame? Isn't usually ever his. Verse 7, it says, finally, he said to the disciples, let's go back to Judea. Some of you have things like that in your life where God has said he's going to help you, he's going to bless you, and you're wondering when, and now there's a finally. You know what finally means? It's about time. It's about time that God's finally paying attention to this. He says, let's go back to Judea. But his disciples objected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? Jesus is not saying let's go back to Judea to heal Lazarus. He already said Lazarus is going to be okay. Go back to Judea. The disciples said, look, the last time we were down there in Judea, it didn't go well for you. People tried to kill you down there. It's not going to be good for us to go back there. Again, this is what people love to do, to give Jesus advice on how he should run his life and run his church and run his ministry. All the time like that. Jesus replied, there are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. But at night, there is danger of stumbling because they have no light. That's another, wait, what? What's he saying here? We're going to go down a road trip to Judea, and now this stuff about light and darkness, and sometimes what Jesus says doesn't make sense to you in the moment. It's only later on you go, oh, bing, 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 it all lines up. So from time to time here at church, I'm going to say things. People get over and say things, you're going to go, what's he talking about? It sometimes takes some time for it to land and take root in our soul. Then he said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I'll go and wake him up. The disciples said, Lord, if he's sleeping, he'll soon get better, right? Because if you're really, really sick, what's the one thing doctors tell you to do? Get some rest, get some sleep. So he's getting some sleep. What they're saying, geez, that's a dumb idea. Go wake him up. That's dumb. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died, speaking kind of euphemistically there. So he told him plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. Wait, what? Jesus is glad that somebody died. Jesus is glad my marriage is dead, dying. Jesus is glad that Jesus is glad about that? I don't know what to make about that. You're going to have moments like this, though, in your journey of discovering and following Jesus. People that tell you discover and follow Jesus, become a Christian, everything turns out great for you, have never been to church or read the Bible. Because I'm telling you, following Jesus is worth it. It's amazing and beautiful and powerful. But the idea, somehow, some way, that it's always beautiful and amazing, there's times Jesus is going to do stuff you're going to go, I don't get what he's saying. I don't get what he's doing here. He says, for now you will really believe, come, let's go see him. And then we have Thomas. Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too and die with him. This is not, let's go too and take on the world and die with him. Any Winnie the Pooh fans in here? A few Winnie the Pooh fans? Yeah, like Winnie the Pooh. And then there's like the owl and all that. And then there's the Eeyore, right? This is Thomas. Well, he's going to die. Let's go to and die with him, as we said. He's being loyal. He's not bailing out on Jesus. Be loyal, but if it follow Jesus, I guess if it kills me, it kills me. Oh, well. This is who Thomas is. He's going, well, if we're going to die, we're going to be loyal to him. We're just going to go down swinging. Jesus shows up. Now, look at verse 17. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. You know what being in your grave for 4 days means? You're dead. You're not just sick and dying. It's not like, is he maybe going to in a coma or come back? You're dead. They've checked you. They've verified this now. And now he starts to stink and smell. Like, we got to get him in the grave. So he's in the grave. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem. Jerusalem's the capital. That's where all kinds of people lived. And so many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. If you know anything about Martha, some backstory on Martha. Martha's a girl that gets stuff done. Mary's a little sister, sits around and just, loves Jesus and all of it. Martha gets stuff done. And of course, I got something to say to you. She's coming out to have a conversation with Jesus. Men, have you ever had that thing with your wife where your wife says, we're going to talk? Is that ever a good thing? That's never a good thing when it's, honey, we need to talk. This is what Martha's going to do. She's going to have a conversation. Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, mark it up in your Bibles there, if only. If only you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. I don't know if you're in any if-only places right now in your life. It's interesting that Mary, her sister, a few minutes later goes out and meets Jesus. And look down at verse 32. She says, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Jesus, we know you're God, and we know you're the Messiah, we know you care, but where were you? Where were you when we needed you? If you'd have been here, this is not like, where were you? This is like, if you'd been here. If you'd have showed up in my marriage, showed up in my finances, showed up in my mental health, those besetting addictions and sins and stuff that just keeps turning up. If only you had been here. And then she says, but even now, maybe mark that up in your Bible as well, but even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. Some of you are at some if only and even now situations right now. I'm not going to even make eye contact with some of you because I know your situation. And it's where are you, God? Are you asleep? Are you paying attention? If only you'd show up here, you could straighten things out here. And I'm not going anywhere. So I'm going to believe in you and trust you. But even now, I know this thing isn't beyond hope. Some of you need to recognize that you have some situations that don't feel like they're struggling anymore. They feel like they're dead and they're done. It's dead, it's done, and it's over. And what the message here is to be like Martha and go, I don't get this, God. I don't like this. It feels like it's over. But even now, God, I'm going to believe that you can do something here. And so I'm not running away from you. I'm not defiantly angry with you, but even now, I'm just going to trust you. I wonder if some of you have some but even now situations right now. It feels like it's hopeless. It feels like I'm sure I'm sitting in church today. I quit praying actually a few weeks ago because all I started praying about, I'm done. I've prayed, and I've prayed, and I've prayed, and I've prayed, and it hasn't done jack squat, nothing for me. But even now, I'm not sure I can pray, but Jesus, whatever you want. You see what changes here though for Martha? You know what her first prayer to Jesus is? Her first thing to Jesus is Jesus, give me what I want. Give me what I ask. My brother is sick and dying. Give me what I want. And now she says, not give me what I want. Whatever you want is what I want. And even if I don't get it, I don't understand it, I don't like it, whatever, God will give you whatever you ask for. So Jesus, right now I want your agenda. I want to know what your plans are in this situation. I don't get it right now, but whatever it is, that's a great way to pray sometimes. It's like, well, you know what to pray for? Because you can pray for your list and go, God, I want this and this and this, but the truth is I prayed for that like crazy and nothing's working here. So Jesus, whatever you want to do here, you get to that place in your life that's a place of wrestling and struggling. That's not how you start to pray. You start to pray going, God, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. As you wrestle with things and it doesn't happen the way you want to, in the time frame that you want to, you cross over a line at some point and go, God, maybe the best thing for me is not what I want. Maybe the best thing I want is what you want. That's a challenging thing. It's a journey that you'll wrestle with God on. There's a famous pastor. His name is Tim Keller. If you get a chance to read anything by that guy, read everything that guy writes. But he talks about prayer this way. You might want to get your phones out and get a screenshot of this because it'll be super helpful for you. Here's the quote. He says, God always answers your prayers in precisely the way you would want them to be answered if you loved as perfectly as he loves and knew everything he knew. And that's a great quote. You go, yeah, that's right, what God does. You know, the truth is, when that's me, God, I'm going to trust that whatever the outcome of this is, even if it turns out badly, because I go, how could it be bad for God to heal something or to restore something? How could God not want that? If he loves perfectly and he knows everything, how could that not be? And sometimes God's going to go, well, because I live in a world where I don't make you robots, where I just jam it down your throat. Sometimes there's real consequences for our actions. And sometimes the best thing for you to learn and the watching world to learn is that you do things opposite of God. Sometimes there's no kind of get out of jail free card. Sometimes some of you go, that's my life for the first X number of years, or my 20-something and 30-something years. I was doing that kind of thing, and I had to experience some consequences to learn from some things, even though I begged God to take it away. I'm just led to say this right now, and some of you go, well, then what's the point of praying? Because Jesus says, I'm like your father, I'm like your dad. I'd love to have you ask me. And I love you after you ask me and trust me enough to know that I love you so much that whatever happens here is going to be the best thing in the situation. And Lord, if only you'd been here, and I know that God will do whatever you ask. And then Jesus told her, your brother will rise again. Yes, Martha said, he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day. In other words, Jesus, I know he'll rise again. I didn't want him to die too soon right now. You know what Jesus does right here? He gives her a theology lesson, which is tricky sometimes because we always tell people don't give people a theology lesson when they're struggling. But sometimes some good theology will help you get through some stuff. Sometimes people need some good perspective. He'll rise again at the last day, and Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never, ever die. Do you believe this, Martha? And maybe it's, do you believe this, Kelly? Do you believe this, Marcus? Do you believe this? And a couple things to believe about Jesus. Number one, Jesus is not a life coach or a consultant, a spiritual leader that's there to dispense advice and to give you life. It's not what he's there for. He's not to dispense life to you. He's not the one that can show you, hey, here's the pathway, and I will dispense the principles and the plans for your life. Jesus is going to tell us the resurrection of life is not in principles and a plan. It's in a person, and it's me. Jesus says it's me you need, not just principles and plans for your life. He says, I don't just have the resurrection of life. I am the resurrection and the life. And he says, everyone who lives and believes in me will never, ever die. And I hear that and go, wait, what? Because the truth is right now, right? The death rate in humanity, 100% right now. So what's he mean by that? This is again, wait, what's he saying? It's this. For everybody who is not a follower of Jesus Christ, death is the destination. Death, at some point, everybody's going to die, and that's the destination. It all goes back in the grave. We're done at some point. What Jesus here is saying is death is a doorway, not a destination. That your life, at some point, will come to an end. But when it comes to an end, that's not the final thing about you. You breathe your last breath in this life, and the next breath in the next life is a doorway to the life beyond this life. That's beautiful and amazing and powerful. He says, look, that's the thing you got to focus on. In the midst of all the challenges and difficulties, and you're wondering how it's going to work out, keep in mind we have a breath of a life here and eternity with God. So he says, make sure you focus on that. There's a life beyond this life that's beautiful and amazing for people who live. Remember he says, live in me and believe in me. That's the life, eternal life beyond this life. Yes, Lord, she told him, I've always believed you're the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who's come into the world from God. And then she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, the teacher's here and wants to see you. So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. Interesting right here. He goes to see Mary, and Mary sees him, and she has a very different posture than her sister does. She falls at his feet, grieving. You know where we find Mary all the time in the Bible? At Jesus' feet. The first time we see her, she's sitting at the feet of Jesus, learning from Jesus. Jesus is talking and sharing things, and she's sitting at the feet of Jesus with this idea of humility and being hungry about this. She's not at Jesus' feet. She's not listening from Jesus, going like, what does it mean? She's just sitting humbly at Jesus' feet, just receptive. I want to hear whatever you have to say. Here she's grieving at Jesus' feet. And then we find out later on, John tells us here in John chapter 11, it talks about it in John chapter 12. The next time we see her, she's taking a bottle of perfume that's probably worth $100,000 in today's market, and taking that perfume and pouring it on Jesus' feet and wiping it, the perfume, and washing his feet with her hair. That might be a good posture for some of us. We sometimes have this too casual approach with Jesus. Jesus is my homeboy. Jesus is my friend. Jesus is this. Or we have this idea of that we're kind of co-equals with Jesus. Like, the dumb thing we say all the time. When I get to heaven someday, I got some questions for Jesus. Like, shut up, pal. You get to heaven, you're just going to be quiet, just going, I can't believe I ever thought. Here's a great posture for some of us today. And just sit at the feet of Jesus. To humbly listen to him. Not to debate him or argue with him, but to say, I got things I want to know here. A sense of humility and all that. And then she's grieving. And if you're in a place of grieving today, you can whine and complain and whatever. Like, don't do that out on social media places or with your spouse or with your friends. Take some time and sit at the feet of Jesus. And yell and cry and weep and she's grieving here at the feet of Jesus. If only you'd been here. She's not going, oh, Jesus, I just believe in you, you're awesome. If you had been here, Jesus, this wouldn't have happened. Struggle with Jesus at his feet. And then sometimes it's to be at the feet of Jesus to worship him. To take what's most valuable and precious to you and say, Jesus, whatever it's valuable in my life, I'm just pouring it out. Not on your head. Not on your face, on your nasty, dirty, smelly feet. It's a picture of being at someone's feet is a picture of intimacy. And some of you guys hear that and go, intimacy with the dude and Jesus, that's weird. Like, no, we're not talking about sexual or romantic intimacy. Intimacy is this close sense of just love and respect and like, I just love him. He's amazing. He's fantastic. It's what worship is all about. Might be a good place for us to be. To maybe even as you pray with Jesus, it's not just sit in your car and do it, but get down on your knees or maybe even just sit on the floor and go, Jesus, here I am. I'm just sitting here at your feet. Whatever you want to say, whatever you want to do, everything I am, everything I have, it's yours. It's yours. Jesus gets up then. I'm not sure what happens in that situation after Mary does that. She falls at his feet. Jesus says here, when Jesus saw her weeping, verse 33, and other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. The word here for this in the Greek language would be a more strong version of the word ticked off. I'm trying to be more careful with language here, not being so crass and earthy. I get some notes from you, so I'm trying to be nicer here today. But he is enraged about this right now. You ever been enraged at something? He's enraged about this right now. And he was deeply troubled, and you see him strut out there. Where have you put him? This is him walking out in the battlefield. Where have you put him? He asked them. They told him, Lord, come and see. And then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, see how much he loved him. But some said, this man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? What we see Jesus here is a God. He's God and fully man. And he's got real emotion. Jesus is sad. Like sad and mad. When it says Jesus wept here, this is not like weep when you see the commercials for the little, the rescue dogs out of awful places, or a sad movie or something like that where, this is snot sobbing kind of crying. He is overcome with grief right now over what's going on here. And my question is, why? Some of you who know the story know he knows what he's about to do. He knows he's about to say, roll that stone away and call Lazarus out of that grave, and it's going to happen. Sneak preview to the end. He knows it's going to happen. Why is he sad then? And why is he mad? You know why I think he's sad and mad? Because he looks at somebody who is a dear friend of his, and now he's experiencing grief. What that feels like, and I see people grieving and struggling and suffering, and he sees what sin has done to this world. We're so casual and callous about sin. In my life, in our life sometimes, it's just a little bit of sin here and there. What's a little bit of evil in the world? Come on, we're just people, we're just normal. Like, no, this is not the way it's supposed to be. And I think he is just enraged at what sin does to people. It creates sickness and disease and creates grief and loss, and people are heartbroken and suffering over this. I think he's just royally ticked off and angry about sin has done to this world. And then they say, couldn't he have done something about this? Couldn't he? If this is the thing for those of you that are students in college classes or that pay attention on social media sites, this is one of the strongest arguments for the existence of God. Because here's the argument. If your God, who you says is infinite, infinite love, infinite knowledge, infinite power, if I had 1/30th of that love and knowledge and power, and I saw that happening right there, I would have done something to stop it. There must not be a God. If there's a God, he'd have done something about that. And the tricky part is when that happens. I was talking to a buddy of mine in my small group this week who talked about somebody's family, their nephew or their grandson, I forget now, was like 5 or 6 years old and got sick. People begged and pleaded, and their church prayed and fasted, and he died. And people said, that's it. I'm done with God. And you know, why does this happen? And don't do the silly thing that sometimes it's well-meaning, and if you ever said it, don't ever say it again. When something tragic or terrible happens to somebody, don't do the, well, God just needed him more than we did. Don't do that. That doesn't help one bit. If God needs my 5-year-old son more than I do, that's not a God I want to follow. You know what the answer when that happens is? I have no idea why this happened. This makes no sense. There's sin and unrighteousness and evil in the world. And the one thing I do know is Jesus lived and died and rose again. And so when I don't get him or don't understand him, that's why we do communion here every week. To get you back to the cross, to the death and resurrection of Jesus for you. When I don't get it, I get my eyes back on Jesus again and go, I don't get how you operate. I don't get why you didn't answer this prayer. I don't get any of this right now. But the one thing I do get is that you lived and died and rose again for me. And so that's all I'm hanging on to right now. It's the best time to share the gospel with people. It says Jesus was still angry. Look at verse 38. As he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across his entrance. Roll the stone aside, Jesus told him. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible. This is what we love to do, to give Jesus advice on how he should run the universe and run our lives. No, not Jesus. You don't want to do it that way. Let's whatever. And besides that, Jesus, you want to go in there and grieve and see your friend for the last time? The smell's going to be awful here. There is no hope that he's coming back to life. This is not like roll the stone aside. Oh, let's see what Jesus is going to do. Like, that's just gross and weird and stupid. It's going to be, it's smelly and nasty out there. Are you sure about this? Write this down today. Sometimes stinky means glory is just around the corner. Look what Jesus says. Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible. Jesus responded, didn't I tell you? You know what Jesus is saying there? Did I stutter? Did I stutter? Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? So they rolled the stone aside. And then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe that you sent me. And then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And some time passes by. You want the video of this, right? I think they're going, come out, he's dead, pal. And And all of a sudden, here's this guy bound in grave clothes, standing at the entrance to that tomb. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. And Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. Unwrap him and let him go. I wonder if today we could look at this story and look at it not just, hey, Lazarus, come out. Some of you need to hear Jesus shout your name today. Kelly, Marcus, Micah, John, Dave, whoever you are today, you need to hear God speak into your heart and say, it's time for you to get out of that life. It's time for you to come out and get out of that life. It might be religion, and it might be rebellion. It might be addiction to something. It might be depression and anxiety. It might be financial challenges and difficulties. For some of you, you're not yet Christians, never given your life to Jesus Christ. You're a good person, because good people don't go to bad people don't want to ever show up at church. So you must be halfway decent to show up at church, but you've never given your life to Jesus Christ today. It's time today to say yes. When Jesus calls your name, he's going to say, come out of that grave. When you hear Jesus call your name, that some people do this silly idea with this sometimes and go, well, I'm going to come out, I'm going to throw off all these things I'm bound up with. So biblical morality about this and that, about money and sex and anger and relationships, or what my parents taught me, or what the church taught me, or what the government or society taught me. Throw that all off, and you do you. You speak your truth. And in a world, it's what's going on in our culture right now. This is the water we're swimming in. It's hyper-expressive individualism. Be true to yourself. Being true to yourself is what gets you into that grave in the first place. Being true to yourself, in our world, Jesus calls us to come out of that grave. What we want to do is, can I just change the grave clothes up a little bit? Can I get some designer grave clothes? Can I get a Sharpie and some things in here? I'll decorate them all up and make them all look nice. Can I get some perfume in here to take the stench off of it a little bit? Jesus says, no, I called your name. I want you not to just stay in the grave and exchange grave clothes. I called you. Here's what he's going to tell you to do. Number one, when you hear that voice of God, whether it's here today or some point this week, number one, get up and get out. Get up and get out of that grave. I don't know what that is for you today, where God's going to speak in your heart. Some of you are feeling that right here, right now, today. God's been after you for a while to get after some things in your life, to either stop doing certain things or start doing something else, to say, let's get after some marriage counseling, let's get after some financial counseling, let's get after some things that are those bad habits and those addictions and the pornography and the alcoholism or spending, whatever it is. Or you can just maybe not do that. Because the second option you can do is just stay in there. You know God's calling you, nah. You know why you just stay in there? Because you're used to this. I know all about this. I kind of just gotten used to the stench and the smell, and I to go, what's out there? That seems kind of weird. So I won't do that. Sometimes we stay in there, in that grave, because we think, well, I don't know. I don't think, you don't know my past, Steve. Jesus, it sounds dumb to say, but God, you don't know my past. God goes, yeah, pal, I know your past. Jesus says, I didn't come to make messed up people good. I came to bring dead people back to life. Bring dead people back to life. And some of you can sit there and go, I'm just used to this, or my past. And then Hannah on our team did a message at our women's group this week on Wednesday. And she talked about this idea of her own life, of being like Lazarus, not so much in a grave, but like in a pit. And talks about coming from the pit to the palace. And sometimes the reason we stay here in this grave is because we've had terrible things happen to us. And oftentimes it's not even our fault. The way we were raised. I was talking to some guys this week about this. Can't imagine some of the horror that some of you have been through. And at some point we get in there and we've gotten so used to that and we get stuck in that cycle of it, we just kind of stay in there. And we have a pity party in there. And a pity party, guys, is still the pit. It's a pit with Y on the end of it. And a pit with Y on the end of it, sometimes a pit with wine on the end of it. And sometimes it's the wine, and sometimes it's just whining about my life. And all you're doing is just letting what happened in your past keep you stuck in there. When he calls your name, you can just stay in there because of what you're used to, because it feels weird. You're not quite sure what's out there. And then the other thing you need to know today, too, sometimes the reason we stay in there, we sang a song today. For those of you who get here on time, heard us do this song. He called my name, and I ran out of that grave. It's a great line. That's not what happened to Lazarus. Because remember it said Lazarus' hand and feet were bound. So when Jesus called his name, you know what Lazarus did? He called my name. And this feels dumb and stupid, right? Sometimes following Jesus at the beginning feels dumb and stupid. And some of the reason you're not following Jesus yet because it feels dumb and stupid and weird. Like, hey, he wants you out of death and into life. Sometimes the beginning stages especially feel dumb and stupid. You've never done this before. You got to hop out and say, whatever it takes, God, I just want what you have for me. To call that name and hop out of that grave. So get up and get out, or you can stay in if you want for different reasons. Number 3 there is, once you're out, stay out. Sometimes what happens, this thing called backsliding happens, is we drift back into stuff. Whether it's spiritual stuff, whether it's addictions kind of stuff, whether it's substance addiction, whether it's pornography, whether it's the toxic relationships that we've moved away from, and now how do I keep going, finding that same guy again? Or that same girl again? What am I doing here? It's because we can just drift back into this old school song that says, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. It's drift. Gravity just kind of pulls us back in there. And so maybe the word you need to hear from Jesus is not come out of the grave, it's to get back out of the grave. You came out at one point, you drifted back in there, get out of that thing again. And then sometimes the dumb thing we do is this. One foot in the grave and one foot outside the grave and try to do this kind of thing. I'm telling you, that's an exhausting way to live. Get out of that grave and then stay out of the grave when he's called you out of it. And then he comes out of there, and remember, he's got all this stinky stuff wrapped all over him. Number 4 is get the stinky stuff off. He smells. When Lazarus comes out of that grave, he's got stinky death nastiness on him. Get the stinky stuff off. Guys, that's what we're called to do as Christians. The fancy Bible theological word for it is sanctification. You've been made right with God. He has justified you, made right with God. Now he wants to clean you up. He wants to transform your life. So you got to get the stinky stuff off, the obvious stuff and the not so obvious stuff. Because here's the thing, is something to think about this. The obvious stuff is like, okay, the big, bad, nasty sins. Can I tell you right now, sometimes the stinky stuff we need to get off, some of us, is not the big, bad, nasty, stinky stuff. It's religion and self-righteousness. Like, ugh. And in the book of Hebrews, it talks about this. He says, hey, in this life that we have with God now, let's get out there and run this race, and let's get rid of the things that hinder us. And it says in the old school Bibles, let us set aside the sin that so easily besets us. And we think set aside means, okay, it's on me. Setting it aside. The word there is a violent word. Somebody last night told me it's a great picture of this. Anybody ever done the spiderweb dance? You know what spiderweb dance is you've done it, you don't know it. And this happens more in other parts of the country where they have, like, their spider is their national bird of that state. In some cases, they're huge. But you're just walking along, bopping along, and all of a sudden, it's the idea of get this off of me. And some of us are sitting there dinking around with sin and going, oh, I kind of like this. Oh, I'm used to that smell. And God goes, no, if you have that attitude towards sin, you have an aggressive attitude. I got to get this stuff off of me. Put this stuff to death. Get it off of me. And be serious about this. Get the stinky stuff off and then keep the stinky stuff off. And then I love, too, when Lazarus comes out of that grave, he says, Lazarus, come out. The next thing he says is, you and you, unwrap him and let him go. There's some things going on in your life that are so a mess in your life, you can't get that stuff off of you by yourself. We're not called to live in hyper-isolationism, just me and Jesus, and I'll just figure this out myself. No, we're not called to do that. We're called, people live in community and friends and family, which is why we have all kinds of small groups here. To study the Bible together, certainly, but the primary purpose of those groups is to make the kind of friends that will help you, that will pray for you, that will encourage you, that will once in a while go, hey, give you a kick in the rear end to say, hey, what are you doing, pal? To love you enough to care about you that way. We have men's and women's groups that meet here. We have some specialty groups that are out there. We have counseling that's out there and available for you guys here at the church and then places here in town. And sometimes the way to get some of that stinky stuff off of you, you need some help. You can't just me and Jesus tough this thing out. You need somebody to come alongside and help you. And it takes a step of humility in some cases, because some of us are thinking, well, then people have to know my stuff. Yeah? Here's what I've discovered now. Having been a pastor now for a lot of years, people are going to find out eventually anyway, pal. And once they find out by just discovering it on their own, it's usually escalated to points where it's destroying your life and destroying your finances, destroying your marriage, destroying your health. Deal with it down here. Get the stinky stuff off. And he says, unwrap him, he says, and then let him go. Let him go. This is the idea of get up, get out, and get going. It's like, don't stay in that grave. Let him go. He's got a life that he has for you. This is life, what God has called us to do, have a life, and life to the full, abundant life is get going. For some of you need to hear this voice of God to you today is it's time with your addiction to get up, get out, and get going. With the infidelity and the betrayal and the things you've dealt with in your life and the blame and the anger and all the stuff you have in life, it's time to get up and get out and get going. When it comes to financial ruin and stuff going on in your life, you need help with your money, get up, get out, and get going. For some of us, it might be a situation where we've got some stuff in our life where I don't know if God ever can forgive this. It's time for you to hear the voice of God, to shout your name today, say, hey, get up, get out, and get going. Whatever that is for you today, we'd love to talk to you about that. On the connection card that Ryan had you fill out a few minutes ago. What does this mean to be a Christian and follow Jesus? Yeah, I'm first hearing about what does all this mean? Jot me a note about that. Some of you are hearing the voice of God today, right now. You can almost feel like somebody's going in your heart, and he's calling saying, hey, come to me. Get out of that grave. I got life for you. I got life for you. We're going to sing some great songs today to celebrate the fact of who God is and what he's done. We're going to sing a newer song about how he spoke to Lazarus, how he speaks to us today in the places of death and smelliness and stinkiness where he wants to get the stuff off of us and have the life. So we're going to sing like that today. As we do that today, we're going to bring you to tables of communion. Here in the four corners of the room, it's bread and juice that symbolizes the body and the blood of Jesus that was given for you and for me. And I encourage you to come there and receive that communion here. Because in the midst of your if only, but even now, and God, what are you doing? Keep your eyes on Jesus in this. Whether he makes sense in your marriage, with your parenting and your kids, with the brokenness, with the struggle of mental health and anxiety that you've got right now, with decisions about your future and where you're going to, all that kind of stuff, keep your eyes on Jesus. And keeping your eyes on Jesus isn't just following his instructions for your life. It's remembering that 2,000 years ago, the Son of God came into this world, lived a perfect life in my place, the life I was supposed to live, died the death in my place that I deserved to die, to bring me back to life. So that I could, at one point when I hear his name, whether I was 7 years old or 27 or 50, whenever it was, he called my name. Because he called my name, I came out of that grave. And he doesn't call my name to come out of the grave myself. Only reason I can come out of that grave is because he came out of his first. He came out of his first. You may have stuff you need prayer for today. Our prayer team is at the back of the house, back in that back corner of the room. If you have anything going on in your life today, some but if only, God, what's going on here? Just struggles and challenges you got going on right now. Don't just sit at the area of your seat. You might need somebody else to help you get the stinky stuff off. Just let somebody pray with you. Look, back there, they're not going to give you advice. They're just going to talk to Jesus with you talk to Jesus about you and with you back there in the back corner of the room, back there where the brown doors are. So Jesus, by your Spirit today, God, my prayer is that today we would hear your voice. Like our good shepherd calling us to come follow. Calling us to get away from the places that have been for us. And God, I'm just moved to think in my own heart right now, I feel like there's some of us that are stuck in places of complacency. Where it's time for us to come out to more fervent devotion to you. God, whatever that is, call our name and then give us the courage to get up, get out, and get going.